Hello and welcome back to the port. I'm the Gavin Major, and today we're taking a look at the teaser trailer for aircraft carriers coming to World of Warships Legends. Now, I should forewarn you that it is heavily work in progress, so some of the things that you see may change. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it play, and then I'm going to dissect it and identify a few things that I've been able to identify from reviewing it. Obviously, this is all subject to change, and yes, I know I'm using the screenshot of British carriers in the background, but that's simply because I'm British bias. It's got nothing to do with British carriers coming to the game. It looks like Japanese and American, which is the most obvious choices. So I'm going to let it play, and then I'll catch you afterwards. Well, I hope you didn't mind the music, simply just to make sure that I don't get a copyright strike because the video contains music, so it's always safe just for me to dub it over with some alternative music. So first of all, we're going to take a first screenshot I've taken, and basically I've got a load of numbers on there so you can kind of track where I'm going with it. So first of all, item number 1, bottom left corner. So we have the tier 5 Japanese carrier Ruggio. She's got 39,600 health, obviously subject to change. But an interesting thing to note is the detected eye symbol at the end of the HP bar. So basically, there's a separate detected indicator for your ship because most of the time it looks like you're going to be flying your aircraft. Going to number 2, which is the top right, which is the minimap. So around the carrier, we have an outer line which has the detected eye on it. So this is your detectability range of your carrier. And then we have an inner circle with a lightning bolt, and that is your legendary trait. Unfortunately, they're not showing what the legendary trait is in this case. Also on the minimap, we can identify that there's an enemy bomber torpedo flight in the air, and you can tell that by the way it looks like kind of three sausages next to each other. So that's quite interesting. Also, you can see that there's the enemy carrier, and so that's we'll come across those symbols later on, but you can see the enemy carriers down at the enemy base basically. Number 3, which is in the top, which is basically the teams. This basically draws your attention to the way that the carrier symbols are there, and there's only one per team. But we are still looking at 9 players per side. Going on to item number 4, you can see there's a new ribbon. This is bomb hits, and you can see that it's basically just a bomb going through some armor, is the best way to put it. Number 5, which is in the center of your screen, identifies that your squadron is detected. So you have 2 forms of information regarding detectability in regards to your aircraft and your ship. Going on to number 6, which is bottom right hand corner, it tells you how many aircraft are ready. So in this case on the left we have the 3 sausages next to each other, which tells us how many torpedo aircraft we got ready, and that's telling us that we have 1 out of 12 ready. And on the right we have the bomb symbol, which is basically your bombers, and this is telling you there's 0 out of 12 ready. However, below that it also tells you the word deck, so it tells you these aircraft are on deck, and also that there's a cooldown, so that's basically telling you that cooldown's in relation to your aircraft taking off. Going on to number 7, which is bottom center of the screen, there's quite a bit of information here. First of all, you're told what aircraft you're using. In this case, it's a bomber's high explosive. Furthermore, it also has a HP bar of your aircraft going around the top of the semicircle. In this instance, it is broken down into 8 segments of HP, which are grouped together in groups of 2. Now, I think the way that is in this case is that each strike for these aircraft is consistent of 2 HP bars, and so you'll note later on that when some aircraft drop in for a torpedo drop, when they drop their torpedoes, those 2 HP bars disappear. We've also got an airspeed indicator. In this case, it's 100 knots. We also have the information telling us that the aircraft are taking off. We've also got a nice compass, which is telling us the bearing at where that we're looking at these aircraft. So potentially we could be looking at maybe a slight compass rework in the future, which would be nice. Whether this stays with just carriers or whether we get this with the other ships will be interesting. Also, number 8. Number 8, we have free consumables on the D-pad. You can push right and you can call a fighter. You push up and you have an engine boost. So basically, when you push a piston engine hard, it gets hot. So obviously, there's a thermometer next to that. And then we also have push down the D-pad to recall your aircraft back to the aircraft carrier. So that's the first screenshot, and that is basically everything I can interpret from that. So we'll move on to the second screenshot. So onto the second screenshot, and we can see that we're playing the tier 3 American carrier, the Langley. So this is going to be as low as carriers go. So it does mean that potentially you can see carriers in tier 2 and tier 3 games, which is going to be amusing. But I guess as long as everything's balanced, then well, it should be okay. Fingers crossed. So that's item number 1. Going to the top right for item number 2, and we have the minimap. And again, we're just drawing attention here. So on the minimap, you can also see there's an enemy bomber squadron, which is like the oval with the top hat, I guess you could say, the one that looks like a bomb. So that kind of shows what that you will be seeing the indicators for friendly and enemy aircraft and their type on the minimap. Also in the minimap, you can see there's a legendary ring around the carrier and also a detectability ring around that carrier. You can also see on the minimap that when you're looking at things, you're looking at them in regards from the perspective of your aircraft, which then becomes that arrow. Also, worth noting on the minimap that there's an aircraft on the range of your legendary trait, and it looks like the same kind of symbol that you have for a spotter aircraft. So that's strange. Not quite sure what that is. Whether there is a consumable on your carrier to launch a spotter, whether it's an air defense fighter, not quite sure. That's quite interesting. But yeah, it's interesting to note that. Also, it's also worth noting that the detectability ring and things like that, they're slightly different to the previous screenshot. So this definitely shows that the clips are coming from different evolutions of the testing. So things that you've seen in the previous one may not be in the next clip you see, and that also means that things that we see in these clips may not actually carry through or may have changed when we actually get our hands on aircraft carriers. So obviously these are work in progress, so just caveat, caveat, caveat. Also worth briefly mentioning that we are looking at 1 aircraft carrier per team again in this version and 9 players per team. Also, the spotted squadron indicator, it's still appearing when you're there with your aircraft. So that's item number 3. Item number 4 on the bottom right. This is quite interesting. So it's telling you that you've got 1 of 10 torpedo bombers ready, but you are flying a torpedo flight, and you've got 10 of 10 bombers ready, and they're on the deck. So basically that's telling you that the next aircraft that you'll be taking up will be your bombers. So whether you'll be cycling between having bombers and then torpedo bombers and just going back and forth on that. Another thing I want to go back to item number 2. I remember now what I want to say on the minimap. Note that there's only 1 squadron per team up in the air from their carriers. So what this means is that you will only have 1 squadron up in the air, most likely. You're not going to be looking at having multiple squadrons up in the air and trying to coordinate them. It's going to be launch your aircraft and then control that squadron, do what you need to do, and then jump back to the carrier. Those aircraft will be recalled and you take off your next squadron. Going on to number 5, and that is bang in the center of the screen. And what I want to draw your attention to here is the reticle that is down on the sea level. And because these are torpedo bombers, it gives you this kind of triangle with a line on incomplete line on the far side. So this is just telling you that's your torpedo drop reticle. So that's what you're going to be lining up on enemy ships. Going on to item number 6, obviously we're back to having that HP bar, and you can see that one of those HP bars is lit up red as you take damage. And if you actually watch this clip in the video, you'll see that that bar disappears when your aircraft starts billowing smoke, and your number of aircraft drops from 5 to 4. However, amusingly, you don't see any aircraft blow up or like fall away or something, but it could be just the clip's too short, or it could be that that element of it hadn't been completely implemented at the time of this being recorded. Also note it tells you what kind of aircraft you're flying. In this case it's torpedo bombers. You've also got your airspeed indicator, which is 96 knots, and you've also got your compass. And interestingly, I've kind of hinted to it as well. You've got a picture of an aircraft, and it tells you how many aircraft are in the flight at the moment still. So in this case, it tells you 5, and if you watch the clip, it actually drops to 4 when you take damage. Going on to item number 7, and in this case, obviously it's a tier 3, so you're not going to have access to loads of consumables, but you have the ability to recall your aircraft back to the carrier, which is pushed down the D-pad, and in this case it's actually active, and that's because the aircraft are actually in the air, whereas in the previous screenshot they were taken off. We've also got push up on the D-pad, which again is for your engine boost, and this is just for this flight this flight only. So obviously every time that happens, that will reactivate. Now amusingly, on both cases, it's greyed out underneath the compass. So that's interesting. There's 2 items that's been greyed out: what's underneath the compass, and also the player's name. Now the player's name is understandable, but what's underneath the compass, that's very interesting. Whether that's the kind of interface that they got rid of, potentially, that's something worth mentioning. Also, number 8, so you see around your aircraft you've got a kind of reticle, like 2 semicircles either side, like kind of bracketing the center of the screen. If you note on the very far on the left, that left one actually has a thermometer, and you can see that there's a white bar that goes partly way up it. That's obviously your engine temperature. So when you push up on the D-pad for your engine boost, that engine thermometer will go up, and then it goes up to the red, and then you've got to stop and you've got to cool your engines down. So that's quite an interesting one there. So looking at Langley, she's got 5 aircraft in this screenshot. Obviously, it looks like a strike is 2 aircraft, so it looks like she probably starts off with 6 aircraft per flight, or at least 6 aircraft in her torpedo bomber flight. Rightio. So on to the last screenshot, and so first of all I want to draw your attention to item number 1, which is bottom left corner again, and here again we're looking at the tier 5 Japanese carrier Ruggio. So first of all we have a detected eye, basically telling you that your carrier is detected. We also have a targeted reticle, so that's also informing you that your carrier is being targeted by someone. So I guess that it's nice to know that someone's probably going to ruin your day. Item number 2, obviously we're back to the mini-map. So obviously around the carrier we can see we have our legendary trait ring in solid yellow. Then we have our detected ring. In this case it's a lighter orange, faded orange with an eye on it, but that eye is partially obscured by the location of your aircraft squadron. But also you can see that there's a fighter squadron circling your carrier. In fact, you can actually see it through the mini-map, and you can see it's about 13 kilometers away. So it looks like maybe there's a consumable to have a fighter cap active around your carrier, which is not controlled when you're flying your flight, potentially. It'd be quite interesting to see that. Now, item number 3, obviously the indicator telling you that your squadron is detected. Item number 4 in the bottom right. Again, this is telling you that you have 4 out of 12 of your torpedo bombers ready, so as they're being rearmed and refueled back at the carrier. You also have 12 of 12 bombers ready, which are ready on the deck. Item number 5, now this is quite an interesting one. This is on the right side of the central reticle, that kind of brackets the middle of the screen. And hopefully in the background I'll have some video footage showing it at half speed, maybe going over it a few times. What you'll notice, when the aircraft are dropping in for their torpedo bomb, this counts up the bar, right? And so I think that kind of shows that's the time that you don't, basically once you say yes dive, that's the time which you don't have control of your aircraft, possibly. I'm not quite sure, or whether that's the time showing this is the time it takes to drop down to torpedo level. Once you drop to torpedo level, that bar then counts down, and I guess that kind of says you can only be at torpedo level for this amount of time. So you can't just fly around at torpedo level. You have to dive down to your, you have a time diving down, you have a time at your torpedo level, and then once you finish the torpedo drop in this case, it then counts back up, and that's your aircraft going from torpedo level back up to high levels. Hopefully that's been playing maybe a couple of times in slow motion in the background. Also, you'll notice during that clip is that the torpedo reticle, it starts off wide and it narrows down as you close into the target. Also in the center, you can see that once with that torpedo reticle, it's kind of broken down into like two halves, almost a bit like a cigarette. You've got the orange stub bit, and then you got the green bit. Now the orange stub bit is basically the time it takes for your torpedoes to arm. So if a ship's within that reticle, the torpedoes are just going to bounce off the ship. And then the green section is the area in which your torpedoes are armed. However, the full length of both parts added together is the total runtime of your torpedoes. Back down to number 6, obviously we have the usual. We have an indicator telling us that we have torpedo bombers, a compass, an airspeed indicator, a picture of an aircraft telling us how many aircraft are left in its flight. And if you may have noticed, I might run it again here. Once your aircraft drop their torpedoes, that counter instantly drops by 2, which is the number of aircraft dropping torpedoes, as those aircraft return to the carrier. Also, number 7, we got the same consumables that we've seen before. So all in all, quite interesting to see and actually have this kind of teaser. We know that we're going to be getting the kind of aircraft carrier interface that they have on PC now, rather than on PC before and World Warships Blitz. So I'm a little bit surprised that we're going to be getting this kind of new interface that they've only brought in on the console about a year ago, give or take. Well, that's everything that I could dissect from the very short trailer that they showed us, and I'll probably be playing it again in slow motion in the background. And I'm pleasantly surprised. And you can see that there has been development going on. You can see there's differences between the different clips that they've done. You can see they grayed out something, so obviously it means that something wasn't quite working. Now, from the post on Facebook and Reddit, basically says that don't expect them this year. Expected Q1 or 2021. We know from the recent live stream they said expect earlier than expected. So whether it could be the later part of the December patch, which should be running into obviously January, so maybe after New Year, very much like we had with Yamato. Will we see it in maybe the February patch or the March patch? It's going to be quite interesting, but it's nice to actually see some progress. It quells some of the hot coals, the hot burning questions that some people have had. Hopefully you don't feel that this has been a video about nothing, and that it has been useful. If it has been useful and you have enjoyed it, feel free to give it a thumbs up. If you like this kind of content, feel free to subscribe, and if you already are a subscriber, I'd like to say thank you very much. If you have any of your own comments or anything that you've spotted, mention it down below. I always try to review everything I can. If you want to send in any of your own game captures, our email address is going to be down in the description, along with the link to Patreon, as this is a non-monetized channel. Until next time, I'm the Galloping Major, and back to the port.